All right. Our first student who will be asking you a question is actually Yash. Yash, what question would you like to ask the commissioner?
Hi, so my first question would be, what advice would you give to students building a blockchain community?
Well, thanks, Yash, for that question. And before I jump in, let me give you my disclaimer, which is that my views are my own views as a commissioner at the SEC and not necessarily those of the SEC or my fellow commissioners. I think it's like anything else. You need to have a clear idea of what you're trying to build for. What's the point of what you're doing? Because I think that will help to guide you and figuring out what you all want to do together, figuring out who wants to be part of that community, and um, then figuring out what it makes sense for you all to spend your time on. So that's a pretty basic thing, but I think sometimes in the world of crypto and blockchain, as well as other things that are new and interesting, sometimes people get caught up with the enthusiasm, but don't think about the nuts and bolts practical nature of what they're trying to do.
Brielle, would you like to ask your question?
What experience most shaped your views on how finance is changing?
Well, that's a difficult question. I've been working in and around financial regulation for almost my entire career, and I've seen a lot of things during that time, including the financial crisis of 2007 to 2009, and then the aftermath of that crisis. And I think those kinds of experiences really do shape you as a regulator. They shape the way that I look at markets. And so I would say probably that time period was the most influential in just thinking about what brought us to that point. What can we do to prevent those kinds of problems in the future? And I think one of the areas that um, really stands out is that a lot of large financial institutions didn't even understand what their exposures were, and certainly people on the outside didn't understand what their exposures were. And so that's something that anything that technology can help us solve, getting a better sense of what people actually owe and what they own, can be quite helpful and should help prevent similar problems in the future.
Thank you. Riley, would you like to ask your question?
How can students get involved in digital asset policies?
Yeah, well, it's great to get involved in policy making early in your career, whether it's about digital assets or something else. So, a couple things. We at the SEC have tried to have a very open process because we do want to encourage all kinds of people to weigh in. And so we have a written input section where you can write us a letter if you have thoughts about how we should approach crypto policy. You can take a look at letters that other people have written. We've had a series of public roundtables, which you can watch. And again, if you have reactions, we welcome your reactions. And you can take a look at the rulemakings that will be coming out from the SEC. And typically, when we do a rulemaking, there'll be a comment file that you can write in a comment letter. It doesn't have to be a formal letter. You can take a look at it. If you have thoughts on it, you can send us an email and tell us what you think we should be doing differently and how you think it might affect your project. So there are a lot of ways to get involved.
Hadassah, would you like to ask your question?
What inspired you to focus on blockchain and digital assets?
Yeah, well, what inspired me was that I was in the right place at the right time, I guess. When I came to the SEC as a commissioner, I had been here before in my career as a staff attorney. Then I was gone for a while and I came back as a commissioner. And I knew that I would be focused on how innovation intersects with the securities laws. Because I knew from being here before that we didn't always handle innovation very well. It's very easy for regulators, as other people do, to get comfortable with the way things are and to not be that enthusiastic about change because it sometimes it's hard to figure out how to approach change as a regulator. And so one of the things that was happening when I started here as a commissioner in 2018 was that Bitcoin exchange traded product applications were coming in. And I was of the view that we should approach those the same way we had approached other types of commodity-based exchange traded products. What happened instead is that we, I think, applied a different standard. And so I started objecting to that early on. I wrote a dissent early on in 2018, and then continued to focus as I thought the agency was approaching crypto in ways that weren't ideal. So I continued to write about those things, and I tried to talk to as many people as I could in the crypto world to understand what they were trying to build and to understand what their challenges were as they tried to understand our regulatory system.
Yash, would you like to ask your question?
What do you think is the biggest regulatory challenge preventing banks from adopting newer blockchain-based payment technologies?
I think for a long time, it was a reluctance to get involved in something that there was certainly a perception that the government was not favorable toward. Banks are very dependent on the goodwill of regulators, and banks and other financial institutions. The SEC doesn't regulate banking, but it does regulate financial institutions. And I've noticed that with the entities that we regulate. As soon as the Commission's attitude toward digital assets, crypto, blockchain became more positive, we started to get a lot of interest from people in the financial industry in trying to experiment with these technologies. And so I think it's a similar thing. The Genius Act was passed last summer, and that deals with stable coins. And as soon as that passed, there was great interest in experimenting with and thinking about how stable coins might be used. And so I think as the industry sees regulators building regulatory frameworks and getting comfortable with thinking about how to regulate these things, you'll see the financial system responding. You'll see financial institutions responding by experimenting.
Thank you. Brielle, would you like to share your question?
How could it help to control the U.S. debt?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
How could it help to control the U.S. debt?
Well, I think the best thing that the U.S. can do to control its debt is to think about, as with any other entity, you have to think about what's coming in and what's going out. And so it is true that as people around the world use digital dollars, use stable coins and other types of dollar-based instruments, it increases the demand for potentially for U.S. Treasury securities and things like that. So that can be helpful. But again, I think that it's just a piece of the puzzle, and the bigger piece is really thinking about trying to bolster economic growth in this country, and also trying to think about spending at the government level.
Riley, what's your question?
If you were to talk to student leaders in Maryland, how would you help them understand what blockchain's future would look like?
Well, the first thing I would say is that it's probably up to you, student leaders, to figure that out. I mean, you are at the age where you will be making a lot of the decisions about how to use the technology, and you'll be thinking about problems and potential uses of the technology to solve those problems. And it really does come down to that. People are experimenting now and thinking about where the technology can be useful. And I think some of that is still up in the air as we watch different experiments play out. I will say that there's a lot of interest, as I mentioned, once the regulatory climate changed and the government was more favorable toward experiments, a lot of people have come in and said, we think it could be valuable to put stocks or to put bonds or to put loans on chain. And there are various uses for that. Or, we talked about stable coins a little bit to think about uses of stable coins. There are other people who think there are a lot of potential non-financial uses for blockchains. And so I think that we really need to watch how these experiments play out. And as a regulator, I'm not really well positioned to say I can imagine exactly what the future will look like. None of us can, of course, but I think the market will have to decide where these technologies help solve problems and where they're most useful. So it's all up to you.
It is up to them for sure. Hadassah, would you like to share your question?
Hi. What will the trade-offs be if Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies were to become mainstream?
I think that the trade-offs are, really whether people want to. It's up to people what they want to use to hold and transfer value. And so I think people are thinking about that all the time. They'll look at something and they'll say, is this a form of value transfer that a lot of other people will accept? Can I go to my store down the street and pay in this particular type of currency or not? They'll think about how predictable is this? Is the value of this currency going to go up and down, or is it going to stay fairly constant over time? How much confidence do I have in this asset? Do I have to think about things like quantum risk or other types of risks? And then I think too, people will think about portability. One of the reasons that crypto assets and Bitcoin, for example, has taken hold in some parts of the world is that people think that it's a safer place to have money to hold value than their local currency, and they might also know that they'll have to flee from persecution, and it's easy to take Bitcoin with you when you flee. So there are a lot of considerations that go into these kinds of questions. It also matters, what does your government think of whether of people transferring value in Bitcoin? If the government is favorable toward it, then it's more likely people will use it. If it's not, they won't. But these kinds of questions really are very personal. They depend on where you are living. They depend on what you value in terms of whether you value having the ability to transfer money over the internet the same way that you transfer data over the internet, or whether you're someone who likes to spend cash and do everything in using cash. So it really is a very personal issue.
Thank you. So Jason, why don't you ask your question?
Hello. So, how do you think AI will affect blockchain in future years?
I mean, I know that the two things will interact. A lot of people are very excited about the intersection between AI agents and crypto, because AI agents would be able to make micro payments, for example, and so crypto could be the currency that AI agents use to do those things, to make those payments. You can also look at it from a more negative side and ask, will AI detect problems in smart contracts that no one knew was there? Now, that can be good in the sense of, as you're getting ready to launch something, you can run it through AI and really check to make sure that it's strong and secure. But if there's a smart contract out there already and someone using AI wants to break it, there's a possibility that they'll be able to hack it using AI. So like any other technology, AI can be good, used for good, and it can be used for bad.
Very, very true. Yash, what is your question?
Okay, so my next question is which parts of U.S. financial law most need updating to support blockchain-based payment systems?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are a lot of pieces that need updating and need updating not only to accommodate blockchain, but to accommodate other kinds of technologies. We are working on a lot of different areas. Custody, which means when a financial institution holds assets for you, what are the rules around that? Those can be a little bit difficult to apply in this world of crypto assets. Another area is how do we think about trading of crypto assets? Are there different because obviously we have a system that's not based on crypto assets. So when people are exchanging crypto assets, particularly of concern to me, crypto assets that are securities, are there places where we need to adjust the rules to accommodate those transactions? People are taking things like money market funds, which are used often when people want to have money handy, but they want to earn a return on it. They'll put it in a money market fund. So people are taking those and tokenizing them. There are questions about then how can you use those tokenized money market funds? There are new things that you can do with them because they're tokenized. Same with other types of things, in stocks and mutual funds and exchange traded funds. There are a lot of questions around how do you raise money using crypto assets. So we're working on rules there. There are questions about the roles of different types of financial intermediaries may change because of crypto. And so do we need to update our rules for brokers, for dealers, for transfer agents, for clearing agencies? And so there really is an unending number of questions that have to be asked. How do you treat stable coins when an entity that we regulate is holding those or helping its clients use stable coins? So there'll be lots of questions when you all graduate from law school, if that's what you're going to go on to do, or you're out there in the working world, you'll be able to help us answer some of these questions, because I'm sure they won't be answered by that time. I'm sure it'll take us years to get through these.
And the layers just keep growing as the tech keeps evolving, for sure. Brielle, what is your question?
What inspired you to focus on blockchain and digital assets?
Yeah, it was really more just a function of that I was here at the SEC at a time when there were a lot of questions that started to come up involving crypto.
Riley, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. Why is blockchain technology and how laws are written important for the next generation to understand?
Well, I think that it's important because I do think, and as I said to an earlier question, I don't know what it's going to look like 10 years from now, but my expectation is that there will be blockchain integrated into our lives, and we will be using crypto assets. Perhaps we won't even know. It may be that we're seeing a front end that doesn't tell us that we're using crypto or blockchain, but that's what's going on behind the scenes. And so it's helpful to understand what your rights are, no matter what technology you're dealing with. You want to know who's regulating it so that you can understand what kind of protections are there. You want to understand if something bad were to happen, is there anyone I can go to for help, or am I on my own? You want to understand whether someone else can take your assets away from you and under what conditions. And so I think for all of these reasons, when you're buying anything or using anything, it's good to have a general understanding of what the legal protections are around that.
Very, very, very much so. Jason, what is your question?
Are there any risks with blockchain and crypto right now that you'd be worried about?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the last couple weeks we've seen some hacks, and those have been some pretty large hacks of DeFi protocols. And so I think that cybersecurity, no matter again whether you're dealing with crypto or non-crypto, cybersecurity issues are going to be at the front of mind, because it's an area of risk for a lot of entities and a lot of decentralized protocols. Everyone is affected by cyber risk, so that's something to think about. I think more generally, as we see the integration of crypto and blockchain into our traditional financial markets, you have to think about risks that arise from the intersection of those things. One thing to remember is that the types of risks that have plagued traditional financial institutions, if you're dealing with a financial institution, you have to think about, is that financial institution going to take care of my assets well? Is it going to be honest with me? Is it going to be careless with my assets? Is it going to do something that benefits itself but not me? And those are the questions those are the issues that regulations like securities regulations are designed to address. When you take away intermediaries, then you can eliminate those risks. Sometimes new risks come into play, such as if something goes wrong, there's no one that you can go to for help. But you also have to think about in the crypto space whether there actually is a centralized entity there that you might not realize is there. And that centralized entity could do some of the bad things that I just said. They could be careless with your assets. They could be dishonest. They could have their own interests that they're putting ahead of yours. And so we need to be really clear about whether there is a centralized entity there. And then if there is, we need to think about how to appropriately regulate that entity.
So a question that I have for you that will help also our students today and those that will be listening to this later. Your role as a commissioner, it's evolved over time because of everything that's going on within the SEC. Do you want to share a little bit about what it is you do and how that might be different than an attorney who's at the SEC, because you have a very large leadership role?
Yeah, a lot of people, certainly when I was your age, I didn't know what the SEC did. So the Securities and Exchange Commission is the regulatory agency at the federal level that regulates stock exchanges, brokers, advisors, the financial professionals who help you invest, and also regulates things like when a public company wants to sell securities. They will look at their disclosures around what they're selling, and same for things like mutual funds. Mutual funds are a type of they're a way for you to invest in a lot of companies at once. So you own a piece of a mutual fund, which then in turn holds pieces of companies. That's what some mutual funds do. Others can hold other kinds of things, but we regulate the disclosures that those mutual funds make. So we have a regulatory role over entities, and we have a disclosure review role. We don't tell people, hey, this is a good investment and this is a bad investment. That's up to you to figure out. But we try to get you the information so that you can make that decision. The SEC, as its name suggests, it's a commission, typically has 5 commissioners. And right now I'm one of 3 commissioners. And so we vote on new rules, we write rules. And so I'm involved in writing those rules, voting on them. And then we also vote on enforcement action. So if someone breaks the rules, and we bring an enforcement action, the whole commission has to vote on that. So one of the functions of the commission is also to help guide policy direction, set policy direction. The chairman is responsible for setting the agenda, setting the budget, and managing the staff. I'm not the chairman, but we, the other two commissioners, help him in deciding the direction of the policy of the agency. And so obviously, with crypto issues, we're all engaged in those. The commission now has a crypto task force, and right now I'm in charge of that. But all of us are involved in the full range of issues. So my colleagues are engaged on crypto issues as well.
Yeah. So the blockchain bootcamp also focuses on workforce development, and if anyone was interested in interning or looking at the skills that they might need to be part of the SEC, what would you suggest to them?
Yeah, and we do take interns. So typically those are law students or college students. But a demonstrated interest in the work that the SEC does is helpful. If you can take classes that are related to anything investment related, if you have background in things like crypto or blockchain, that could be helpful too. Familiarity with new tools like AI, and you all will probably use those much better than we do. So that can also be quite helpful. But I think it is good to think about what you want to do in the future and find an internship that helps with that. If you are thinking of doing something like going to law school, working at a federal regulatory agency can be an interesting step along the way there. And it's also something to think about, for your long-term career, if that's something that you're interested in. Helping to set the rules within which an industry works is an interesting job to have. It also helps to have some experience out there working in the industry, so you know what you're regulating. But there are a lot of different paths. But I would certainly encourage you all to look into our internships when you are at the right stage in your careers.
What intrigued you to apply to the SEC for initially as a young attorney?
Yeah, I had not intended to go to the SEC. That was never my plan. I was working at a private law firm, but I worked on securities law issues, and I worked with a lot of people who had spent time at the SEC, and they were very positive about their experiences at the SEC. And so I thought, it sounds like an interesting place to work. And then there was an opening that was very, very appropriate for me, given the kind of work I had been doing at the law firm. And I also realized, and especially after getting to the SEC, I realized how helpful it was to have the perspective of being inside the SEC to really understand how the agency worked and how the law worked. So it ended up being really a wonderful step, because I got to meet so many fantastic people at the SEC and worked with wonderful people. So even though it wasn't what I had planned, it ended up being a really, really fantastic experience.
So to help also the high school and the college students that might be listening to this, there's different ways to actually step into the government. It might be through the application, but it's also through political appointment, and you've experienced both. So when someone is politically appointed, is it through a recommendation, or how does that work?
I think it works different ways, but for me, I had worked after my time at the SEC, I went and worked in the Senate for some time. I worked at the Senate Banking Committee. And so at the time that I was first nominated for this position, my name was floated up through folks in the Senate. But it just depends. There are a lot of different ways to get here, and I think it helps to have a wide variety of experiences and to work with a lot of people. so that people can see your work, and maybe when something like this comes up, they think about your name, because you've been working on these kinds of issues. So I would say kind of my core piece of advice is, if you find something that you're interested in, try to develop as deep an expertise as you can, and try to do whatever you're doing with excellence, even if it may seem, I don't personally get bored. I find these issues fascinating, whether it's crypto related or non-crypto related. But even if you don't find your day-to-day tasks particularly interesting, I would urge you just to really do an excellent job, to show up in person when you can, because I think having personal connections with people, not just video connections, it's helpful. And then when there's something to be done, if you're the one who's standing there, they're going to ask you to do it, and that's every time you get asked to do something, it's an opportunity to show how valuable you are. And so, I would say take advantage of all of those opportunities, even if it means staying later than you had wanted to stay at work. Obviously work-life balance is important, but I think particularly as you're early in your career, you want to get to work with as many people as possible. It will not only help them to see how good you are, but it will also help you to figure out what you really love doing. Trying as many things as possible helps you figure that out.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned one other location that individuals might have an interest in learning about, and that's the Senate or the House side. And so from applying to those areas, were you appointed or did you apply?
Oh no, I applied when I was finishing up here at the SEC. There was an opening that was very fitting for my background, and so again, that wasn't really what I had planned to go and do. But given that the job seemed like such a good fit, and I thought it would be helpful to learn that side of things, I went ahead and took that, and it was very interesting. It was a very interesting time to be working on the Hill, so I appreciated that, and again worked with fantastic, really smart people, and so it ended up being a very good experience.
So for everyone who's on right now, we have only just a few minutes left to speak with the commissioner. Do you have any other questions that you would like to ask her? I know that we've gone through all the questions that we had listed, but is there any other questions that you would like to ask her? You can unmute and ask.
Sure. So I have one more question. So as cashless systems continue to expand in the economy, what regulatory gaps or holes does the SEC see in current digital payments?
Yeah, well, I should emphasize that digital payments really are outside the SEC's purview. That really is more of the banking agency's purview, and that's both, that can be both federal and state level banking regulators. But I do think that we all are being challenged as things move on chain to think about what that looks like. And one of the big challenges for the SEC is thinking about what it will look like if securities that we regulate are trading in, for example, decentralized environments. And what will the connection look like between those decentralized environments and the entities that we typically regulate, like exchanges and brokers? And so I think that will be a challenging area for us. One other thing I think it's worth pointing out is there's a lot of use of the financial system to monitor conduct, to look out for bad behavior, to look out for people who are engaged in money laundering or using the financial system to do bad things. And it's obviously important for the government to be going after bad actors, and the financial system can be helpful to the government in doing that. But I think it's very important for us as a people to also think about protecting people's rights to use the financial system without having to reveal all of their information in doing so. And so building in an understanding across our society of the importance of people to be able to use the financial system with an expectation of privacy. Now, obviously, if you're doing something wrong, you lose that expectation of privacy. If there's a suspicion that you're doing something wrong, the government needs to be able to come in and look at what you're doing. But building in those really fundamental values about how we as Americans live, I think is important to do early on as we regulate.
Thank you so much. Any other questions from anyone, if you'd like to unmute? Okay.
I do have a question.
Sorry, I have a question. How do your prior work experiences help you in your current position at the SEC?
Oh, that is a good question, and it's definitely true that all of my experiences have helped me somehow. I think very helpful was being a staff member at the SEC, because that enables me to understand a little bit better about the challenges that staff face in the work that they do. And then working at the Senate was helpful because Congress tells us as a regulatory agency what we're allowed to do. And I came away from that experience with a real appreciation for the guardrails that Congress places around us. They tell us, this is your area, focus on this area, and don't try to do other things. And so I'm very sensitive to us staying within the lane that Congress set out for us.
Riley, you unmuted. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes. So as we start to advance in blockchain, how you plan on making sure that there's how will you make sure that you guys avoid overregulation while also preventing risks in markets?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the balance that we're trying to achieve, is giving people the room that they need to make decisions for themselves. That's important, right? That's what this country really does, rely on people to make decisions for themselves. But at the same time, we have a mission, as I just mentioned, that Congress gave us, and that mission is protecting investors, facilitating capital formation, and fostering market integrity. And so we're always thinking about those three objectives as we look at what's happening. So we need to write clear rules, and then we need to enforce them in a way that is not arbitrary, that if you're doing something bad, it doesn't matter who you are, we're going to come after you unless you clean up your act. So I think that is really the goal, is write clear rules and then enforce them in a way that makes sense. But it's a challenging thing to get that balance right.
I do have a follow-up question. I'm sorry. I do have a follow-up question to that. When you say challenges, what are one of the biggest challenges that you face when trying to protect those three things?
I think one of the biggest challenges is that sometimes because as I said, we write rules, but we also bring enforcement actions. So in my role, I see a lot of really bad conduct. I see people who are just, doing really bad things to other people. And so part of the desire of a regulator can be to try to step in and stop anything bad from happening. And that means that you might want to cut down on the opportunities people have to invest, because you might want to protect them from investing in something that's not good. And ultimately, that isn't the right answer. The answer is we need to do the best we can to get good information out there so people can make good decisions for themselves. And also to help educate people and build the foundation for good financial education in our society, so that when you're looking at buying something, whether it's a crypto asset or a stock, to look out for certain things. For example, that if someone is telling you, you have to invest in this today because this great deal is going to go away, and you'll never have a deal like this in the future, that you can just say, no, I'm not interested. I'll take my time to figure out what I want to invest in. I'm not going to rush. And when people say they promise you that you're going to have these fantastic, you're going to get $100 back for every dollar you put in, and you're going to have no risk at all, you can say that is totally unrealistic. I don't believe that I can make a lot of money without taking any risk. And so you're able then to decide for yourself how much risk you want to take, and really make decisions based on what you know about your own circumstances that no one else, not even a regulator, will know. For example, if you're trying to save money to buy a car, you should not put that money in something that is likely to be very volatile, right? Because you need the money to buy the car, so you can't afford to have that investment drop below what it is. So you might want to put that in an investment that has lower risk, right? But if you're investing for the longer term, you might want to put the money in the stock market, because you know that over time there will be ups and downs, but you can build your money and watch it grow over time. And so I think really the best thing we can do is empower people to make good decisions for themselves, and not try to step in front of them and make those decisions for them.
Thank you. We probably just have time for one last question, if any of you have that question, because I know that the commissioner has to go. So any last question? No? Then we want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing your experiences. And I know that this is going to benefit a lot of other students who are going to be listening to this as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all, and thank you, Jackie, for putting this together. I appreciate it and wish you guys all the best.
We will talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.